civil society organizations are rallying together to ensure state capture never happens again. They believe that stricter measures will ensure the toxic relationship between money and politics does not continue. They also say a strengthened political party funding act will provide the tools needed to combat corruption, among other things. Let's find out how the civil society organizations plan to do this. We're joined by My Vote Counts Robyn Pasensie. Robyn, thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon. And that's just it. I guess the devil is in the detail. How to make sure that state capture does not happen again.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on the show. And I think you put it very aptly. The devil is in the detail. I will not belabor the point about all the scandals that came out from state capture, but I think what has been very clear, and which Zondo emphatically stated in his report, is that there is a direct link between money and political decision making. And if we want to prevent the kind of institutionalized corruption that we've had under state capture, we really do need to take seriously the details around our legislation, and in this case, the Political Party Funding Act, and close off those areas where political parties and potential donors can exploit to continue to funnel in these large amounts of money. And as a civil society collective, that's really where our efforts are moving to at the moment.
The Political Party Funding Act has been touted as an important tool to combat corruption. However, in the fourth quarter of the 2021-2022 financial year, only 2 political parties actually declared, and that's according to the IEC. That's the African National Congress and the Democratic Alliance. We're also relying on political parties to be honest here, and some would very well argue that we have found them wanting. So just how far will it go practically?
Absolutely. I think there are more questions than answers that we've had over this first year of political party funding disclosures. And I think what's important to note is that the PPFA specifies very specific kinds of information that can be disclosed. In other words, only if you receive a donation of 100,000 Rand and above, and this is either in cash or in kind, then you are liable to disclose that to the IEC. So what we are only ever getting with the PPFA is just a small sliver of the entire funding picture of our political parties. So as you mentioned, in the fourth quarter, there were only 2 political parties that declared, the ANC and the DA. And this, I think, is very well a consequence of the criteria that you have for disclosing under the PPFA, but also in a very real way. Those are the 2 largest parties in South Africa. Outside of an election year, like we had during the second and third quarters that were in the run-up to the local government elections, smaller political parties more than likely find it very difficult to source private donations when they don't have the kind of grounding that these larger political parties have, and so they can leverage political power to source more funding throughout the year. So that's also a possibility as to why they were the only 2, perhaps, to disclose in that fourth quarter.
And interestingly, that report of the IEC in terms of parties that actually declared came on the back of the local government elections in November of last year. And the IEC noting that the more imminent the elections, the more likely that parties will receive significant donations. Just for the purpose of a viewer who might be interested to find out, why is it so important?
It's a trend that's not likely to change.
I beg your pardon, Robyn. Just maybe outlining why it is important that South Africans or the electorate actually knows who is funding the political party.
I think the short answer is that when we don't know, things are allowed to operate in secret, and it takes away from the ordinary public's ability to have a representative that's actually going to work in their interest. When we just have our politicians able to go out and source any amount of money that they want, it opens them and perhaps the political party up to wider, broad corruption, like we've seen with state capture. And then you have a failing of your state and democratic institutions, and the people who suffer are ordinary South Africans, ordinary voters. And that's really the reason why we should have this information at our disposal so that when it especially comes to an election, when you go to the ballot box, you can say, I refuse to put my X by this political party because they have in fact not opened themselves up to representing the public. They're actually just working in the interest of some shadowy individual or big business.
From the work that you do, does it appear that the average South African actually cares? I ask that maybe in relation to what we saw in 2021 with the local government elections, the low amount of people that actually turned up to vote. Are South Africans more interested in bread and butter issues like trying to survive?
I think in general, the South African public do care. What we are questioning is the point at which that care about the political situation, about the socio-political situation, changes to action and not to apathy. And I think the situation that we are in at present is that there is a lot of opinion, a lot of frustration. I mean, we saw that a year ago with the July riots. There's a lot of frustration, a lot of anger. It's not as though people are not politically engaged. But what we seem to be seeing is an apathy towards our politicians and to politics in general. And this trend is actually borne out by research done by Afrobarometer, released earlier this year, where South Africans were polled. And startlingly, overwhelmingly, South Africans do not have trust in the executive, in the ANC, or in our opposition parties. That's really falling in large measure in a response to corruption. So for us in our work, it's about leveraging and mobilizing the interest to action, sort of a turn away from this apathetic approach to politics.
Robyn Pasensie is with My Vote Counts. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.